ROSTREVOR and Kilkeel, around and in between, there's more than a road full of speeding. Anywhere you stop on the banks of the loch, there's a feast for the eye full of freedom. Mountains every side, a painter's paradise. There can be no better place to be. So won't you come along to the sound of the song? Together we'll see what we can see. What's that there? What's that there?
Hilary McGrath, you're very much of an all-rounder sportsman. You won an All-Ireland medal with Down in 1968. Your brother, of course, Pete McGrath, managed the Down team, managed the Irish team as well.
That's right, indeed he did, yeah. And the last Ulster team. The last Ulster team in the Railway Cup. That was the finish of the Railway Cup competition.
Yes.
Don't know if that was because he finished it or what, but finished it.
And Matthew, of course, a great musician and a great person. We might have a song from Matthew before the end of the programme as well. And you were a musician as well. You played with the Brian McCollum group, didn't you?
Played with Brian McCollum way back in the early 60s, which included Sean Daly from Warren Point, Paddy Clerkin, Val Morgan, Harry Morgan and myself, who all lived within 3 doors of each other. So they were good times, and then in later years, in the 70s, was part of the local ballad group here who was in the score competition. We got the All-Ireland final and as Ulster champions in 78. So that was the end of the foist, Tommy.
Hilary, you've got a great story to tell, and that's another story that we'll have to visit some other time.
Absolutely.
Well, there's so much to talk about, and you and the ROSTREVOR Historical Society, that's yourself, Patricia Strong,
Kevin Hanna, Paul Clerkin, Jerry McCormick, Paul Murray. That would be the core.
Yes.
The core group. Then
and all the people feed into it.
Come in every now and then. We have produced 5 publications. They all tell the stories of, or at least some of the stories about the place.
We're down in the square of ROSTREVOR, and in a place where a lot of artists were when they painted ROSTREVOR at different times. And Hilary, would you bring us through those dates and those brushings?
So it depicts the village in 1791 from beside where the ROSTREVOR Inn, the original inn was, which later became known as Sangster's Hotel and then the ROSTREVOR Hotel, and in between also known as the King's Arms and the Queen's Arms. But when Nixon came, he painted from there. So
we're going to get a picture of where he was.
Looking across at Bridge Street and the corner of where Church Street and Bridge Street come together. And the one thing that is there, was there then and is there today, you will see ROSTREVOR was 7 Irish miles from Newry, and again it's referred to just as 8 Mile Bridge, which was the name for Hilltown prior to being called Hilltown, was because of the bridge at the Ban there. That was 8 miles from Newry. So ROSTREVOR was 7, and that milestone is in the drawing, in the painting, and it's still in the square today. So there's that connection. The second drawing is a drawing by Sir Richard Coltore, who actually did a tour of Ireland and came from Hilltown to ROSTREVOR, stayed overnight at the inn, and he then drew his drawing, painting in 1806. The next drawing that we have, it's 1853, and again taken from the inn. This guy called Francis Ward, and again it just shows the development of the village in terms of the buildings, the structures, and then we go to where the real treasure of our history in terms of the village are the photographs taken by the employees of William Lawrence. They take us to the village scene of about 1870. And the story, which we look at this particular picture, even within the picture, there are so many stories with some of the houses here. For example, we can see in this particular one John Cull, the name above the door, and the story of Cull's family in the village, and in particular in the 1880s and in the particular year of 1889, is a story for another day, but it's a fascinating story as well. So that's 1870s, and then we go from that on to the 1899-1900, where Culls have, because of the series of tragedies within the family, and the business eventually run by the two girls, who I believe are the two girls in the photograph of 1870, they sell up the business, and it's bought by a guy called Patrick Brady. He knocks down the house and builds what we now see today as Stella Maris.
That period, the late part of the 1800s, was a time when many changes took place in Rostrevor.
It was led by the Earl of Kilmurray, who was part of a group, Norton and Shaw, two other guys, Norton and Shaw, and Kilmurray was also a director. And they had this vision, and it was all contained within what was known as the Rostrevor Improvement Act.
Well, thank you very much, Hilary. Fascinating stuff there. And we will be returning to some manifestations of that Rostrevor Improvement Act after a while. But first of all, we'll head up to see what was happening in Kilkeel in around this time, in around the harbour. But before that, Wendy Graham-Hanna, you mentioned earlier on we might be getting a poem or two from you. Could you tell us when you first began to write?
I think sort of after having some of the children, in between times it became a hobby for me to write down my thoughts. And I think that was all thoughts, whether I was frustrated or, felt that I wanted to get my point across. But I think looking back, Tommy, to school years, I maybe wasn't massively influenced by poetry, but my mother always, and still to this day, loves to caption things, and she loves proverbs and sayings, and she would have rhymed things quite a lot. I think that sort of stayed, all these proverbs, and I just have a love for words.
Well, you were certainly proving that, and a lot of what you write is very much influenced by where you live and the people that you were part of.
I think especially being in Mourne, we've become aware of our brogue, and I always find it fascinating that there can be very few miles between a place and we all speak differently. But I think there is a very huge influence of the Ulster Scots language, and we find ourselves using these words every day. I remember my mother saying to me different times, "Would you howl your wish?" Probably on more than one occasion. Well, this poem, I suppose, is very much inspired by the fishermen and the trawlermen and the folk around the coast, and even at Carlingford Loch, the men who have the urge to go fishing. And this was a wee bit inspired by a quote I had heard that was, many men go to sea for years, not realising it's not actually fish they're after. It's, just to have a draw to the sea. And of course, we've many fishermen here. So this wee one is called Fishing for Hearn. Early September, your day's work just done, away to the harbour afore evening comes. Skiff after skiff head out to Mourne shore, to chase the hearn hog like their father before. Fishing folk from Kilkeel and along, happed up with their wellies and duncher caps on. Hordes of hearn boats, a braw sight indeed, all bright and lit up like a village at sea. Casting and hauling on the silvery calm, till they're up to the rocksters in Hearn by the Cran. Time to red up, enough for today, makes a queer bonny sight coming round the Quay Bray. And that's really about, we would call, you know, the pier head on that area, the Quay Bray in Kilkeel. You know, it's a beautiful sight to see these people who are maybe working all day and have a wee boat, and to see father and son and family, it's a lovely sight.
Wendy Graham-Hanna, thank you very much indeed. It was on a fine and a pleasant day, out of Kilkeel Harbour I was faring, as a cabin boy on a sailing lugger, for to hunt the bonny shoals of herring. Well, Roy Teggarty, you're very welcome to the programme, Roy. You are very much of a Kilkeel man, a Mourne man, and you've got an amazing CV of a full life that you have led and are leading. A teacher, a sportsman, both on and off the field. You played rugby for Chroí, you played hockey for Kilkeel, chairman of the Kilkeel Tennis Club, chairman of the Northern Ireland Schools Football Association and the international team that went with that, on the board of Kilkeel Development Association. You set up the Maritime Heritage Centre, now down at the Nautilus Centre in Kilkeel. You chaired the committee that set up the Seafarers Memorial in Kilkeel, manager of the lifeboat station for almost 20 years, and currently chairman of the Carlingford Lough, commissioners responsible for all the navigation, etc. on Carlingford Lough. And if that is not enough, you're currently writing a history of your own family's maritime history, and so on. Well, it seems, Roy, that there has always been fishing in Kilkeel and a harbour and so on, but I suppose it was a beginning at one time or other.
It's a good question, because interestingly, 200 years ago, as it happens, in 1821, there was a survey done by a fellow called Alexander Nemo, and they were looking at having a fishing port or a fishing harbour or a fishing station in Kilkeel. Mm-hmm. And he reported that that wasn't possible because the main Kilkeel River, where small boats used to be pulled up, he said it wasn't possible because it filled up with gravel and there was a groin across it, and it just wasn't possible to have a viable harbour in Kilkeel. At that time, of course, Anna Long was working as a harbour, and so that time there was no harbour and there was no prospect of a harbour until, I suppose, later on, then through a lot of lobbying, they did start to build a few piers, and the various piers went up right through the 1800s, and people drew little boats up and so on. And the main, I suppose, the first harbour is what we have now called the Basin, around about the 1860s. And some of the early photographs show that, a very basic dock, if you like. They reckon one of the first photographs of the old dock, or the basin as it's called, but that's about 1876. Mm-hmm. There's not much to that. There's a bit of a boatyard you'll see at the top end. At the very top end is a bit of a boatyard. Mm-hmm. And we reckon about 1876, because a guy called William Painter came from Cornwall as a boat builder in 1875. And he set up a boatyard at the very top of the picture. Yes. You see that? There's a difference there now. In the 1880, about 1887, right? Mm-hmm. The Treasury gave the locals about £7,000, and now that basin, that old dock you saw before, that was raised. There's better walls around it, and it was raised 18 inches. And also a knuckle was built. You see the way the bit sticks out at the entrance to the basin. Also, in that photograph, it's a great photograph. You see all the stuff that was exported with those schooners. On the right-hand side, near the old store, the old shed, there are lots of pit props. wooden pit props going over to England for the pits. And then on the other side, pit props with a lot of granite sets. If you zoom in the photographs, there's granite curbs and granite sets, obviously going over to Manchester, Liverpool, all those places. Those were all exported in those days by those schooners you see sitting in that basin.
Okay.
That now shows that basin again full of ships. And there's one here on the right-hand side, that one. Can you see when I'm pointing to that? Yes?
Is it just on the right-hand side in the foreground?
As you enter the basin, that one on the right-hand side along the wall.
Yes.
That's a boat called the Mill Bay. And someone called Chestnut wrote a whole history about that traded backwards and forwards from Kilkeel. And you see there, of course, the knuckle is very clear there. That knuckle is very clear in the foreground there now.
Yes.
And obviously at this time, there are a lot of herring curing going on. You see the barrels along the left-hand side. There's a lot of herring being cured and exported. You see the barrels there sitting along the left-hand side.
Yes, yes.
That was a very big business. A lot of that stuff went to Russia and places like that, believe it or not.
Huh.
In the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then when that all died out, that's when the whole thing changed. Here we are now after 1918. We've moved in to a new inner basin. We've broken through and they've made a bridge. That's a sliding bridge. You see the bridge?
Oh, yeah.
That used to slide backwards and forwards. And you still see the stores there now, those stores that I was telling you about earlier, they're still there.
Yes, yes, yes.
And you see the basin, the old basin is still there, but no boats on it now because all inside in the other harbour.
Right. Yes,
Well,
yes.
that's just showing you what it's like inside that new, if you like, inner basin.
That's an interesting looking ship, that the one there on the left. There's a couple of them.
Yes. Well, those are lovely big schooners. And those are quite new buildings behind that, you see, on that side of the harbour. And at the very top, just at the top of the bank, that's the new Coast Guard houses. That's the big Coast Guard house. They're still there today, of course, but they were built about 1906. That now you're into much later, obviously. You see that photograph now is virtually taking the same angle as the previous one. And of course, you're 30 or 40 years ahead. This is probably the 50s and 60s.
Yes. No idea who the children are.
It could well have been me running about those days. That's my all those boats there. Yeah, those are boats. That's the way I remember the fishing fleet. My father had a boat similar to those you see sitting there. Now I think that's probably the last one I've sent you. That's what it is now. And that in 1973 they extended. It wasn't like this now in 73. In 73 they extended up. If you like, I don't know how you're looking at this, but on I'm looking at the right-hand side, the side where all those other boats were, right? And right up there. And then right from 1980 on, the north side, remember I told you the river, see all down the other side? They put a new quay down the north side as well. And now it's all factories and things. That's where one of the previous photographs, you saw the river and the road running. All down that side now is all changed. And then, of course, in about 2007, they built a pontoon for those smaller fishing boats. And as you see now, Tommy, I'm telling you, a lot of quite small boats, but they're all fiberglass. They're none of those wooden boats you saw in the earlier photographs.
There's something very special and romantic about the old wooden boats, isn't there?
Well, I like the wooden boats, yes.
Yeah.
But the wooden boats, you see, there's the maintenance issues, and you have to paint and fix, and you just don't do those nowadays, you know.
Yeah.
That's history, I'm afraid.
Yes. What's the future for the fishing in Kilkeel generally, would you say?
That's a good question. I think most of the fishermen voted to leave Europe, hoping to have more control of their fishing grounds. And I'm not quite sure whether that's going to work out exactly the way they want it. Maybe not realizing that most of their product would go to Europe. But the fishing industry will continue, and it has, Kilkeel in particular. If you look at the fleet now compared with 20 years ago, the harbour's full of boats, big boats, small boats, more modern boats, nearly all steel boats now. In my father's time, he was a fisherman, a skipper of a boat as well, and they were wooden boats. So they talk about wooden boats and steel men. So now they talk about steel boats and wooden men. So I don't know. But no, the fishing industry, I think, will continue. People need to eat. They want fish. Obviously, at the present time, it's not great. There's difficulty with that. But no, I see a future still for Kilkeel and the fishing industry, and they will continue to catch cod, prawns, of course, which mostly they catch nowadays, lobster, crab. There's boats fishing in Isle of Man, fishing for scallops and so on and so forth. You've got mussel fishing. No, it's a very diverse fishery at the moment, but they'll do all right. I think it'll survive okay.
Roy, you're a walking history book.
Well, that's something I've been doing as well. This past year has been interesting because I've written about the harbour and I've written my own family history and so on and so forth.
Very important to do it. Roy,
Yes,
listen, thanks very much indeed.
Hello, Todd. You're welcome.
All the
Have
best.
a good day. Keep safe. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A man of many parts, and I could talk to him all night or listen to him all night. Well, I suppose it's the sea that divides and unites the whole world with a wave of a swish. And we're going to end the programme tonight with a wonderful singer from ROSTREVOR called Bróna McVittie, who is very well known all around Europe and various places around the world. And she's going to sing a song of emigration. We're going to leave you with this one. Many thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. And from Bróna McVittie, this is A Storm of Grief. Good night, good day, and good morning.
Your heart will be sorely grieving, for the stranger's land may be bright and fair, and rich and treasures golden. You pine, I know, for the long, long ago, and the love that is never olden. A storm will creep in the stranger's land. There is plenty of wealth and of wailing, while the gems adorn the great and the grand. There are faces with hunger peeling, for the road may be drear and hard to tread, and the light Won't you turn the stór from the throng and the list, and maybe you'll hear me calling, for the sound of a voice will be surely mine, for somebody speedy returning home. Won't you come back soon to the one who will always love you? Thank you.